Sonny doesn't remember me as well as I remember him, but there's a reason. So when I got my first job out of college, everybody, many of you know this, it was in Las Vegas. I was 22, 23 years old, and I worked for a TV station, KVBC. The late Jim Rogers owned it, Channel 3. And so I was this young, pesky sportscaster, a little smart alecky. I covered UNLV. Well, they were at the time exploding into a power. So Sonny Vaccaro was at practices regularly, and Sonny is now joining us for our TV viewers. And I knew you were a shoe guy, but I didn't understand the industry. I didn't know what the hell Nike was, or I knew Converse. Now, the story over the course of time, we didn't have the internet. Cable TV wasn't as pronounced. I just knew this guy was a shoe guy that was all over the country, and the players at UNLV absolutely loved him, and Tark loved him. And I knew when Sonny was at the practice, he was a big deal because of the way Tark would stop practice and run over to Sonny Vaccaro. So let's start with that. You had a lot of coaches that you were close to. I always felt like you and Tark, it was like brothers, the way you communicate. I honestly initially thought you were a relative. Were you and Tark close, as it appeared to me?
After I started my All-Star game at Dapper Dan in 1965,
yeah.
I was 24 years old at that time, me and my boyhood friend Pat DeCesar in Pittsburgh. It was the first All-Star game 13 years before McDonald's even existed.
You created
first one
it.
in America.
Yep, you were 24.
And now I'm getting going, and I had no idea what was happening in the world other than I thought this game would work and kids would play in front of an audience. At that time, about the second year in, we became so successful because what I had were the best players in America. There weren't a lot of camps at that time. All the guys were, whatever. And that's when I started meeting college coaches for the first time in my life. I had no connection with them prior to that in my life. I just thought I'm gonna do an All-Star game. Who came, and I thought it'd be local people and all that sort of stuff. To be very honest with you, Jerry Tarkanian came with his best friend, one of the boosters from Long Beach State.
Yeah,
he was at Long Beach then.
Yeah,
to see, a couple kids that were in the thing. That's where I met him, and because I always, I had good players, and Jerry would come continuously. We formed this friendship because he was so different than anybody. And at that time, as you said, there was no internet, nothing. You knew your local teams. Very few people knew who existed in basketball, the players included, other than the local people. It wasn't you didn't get a score right after they scored the basket. And, there's not a running thing on your telephone.
Right.
So Tark was the most different person I've ever met in my life at the beginning.
Yeah.
At the very beginning, his personality, he was an everyday coach. He was an everyday person. He always was like that.
Kind of a blue-collar, regular guy.
He would talk to you if you had a gun in your hand, and was threatening to shoot him, or if you had something to eat, you want to go get a free meal, which Tark also liked to do at that time. But that's who he was. So we became good friends, and it transferred later on to it got bigger. But the thing that changed everything was a kid named Raymond Lewis, a great legend, and they just did a documentary on Raymond. Raymond was the greatest high school player I ever saw at that time. At that time, ladies and gentlemen, it was the 60s, late 60s, early 70s when this kid. Jerry was at Long Beach State. He was recruiting Raymond, and the world was, and he came in second place because he ended up another place that they made a better deal than Tark did at Long Beach State, okay? And on that day, the game I went to, they actually beat Long Beach State, Raymond's team. From that day on, Tark and I became inseparable because the next job he took right after that loss, UNLV.
Yep.
Now I have gambled since 1963 when I was a kid out of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
When I graduated, two friends of mine drove to Las Vegas so I can play poker at the Dunes, to be very, very honest with you. And coming from Pennsylvania at a young age, gambling was a part of our lives.
Sure.
And poker and playing and all that sort of stuff was there. Tark and I became inseparable because I spent half the year in Las Vegas and half the year in Pittsburgh getting ready for my Dapper Dan game. Yeah. I didn't really I promoted the game. I represented a couple kids like George Gervin to go to the ABA.
Yeah.
I hustled, but it was all basketball.
You're a hustler.
Now I meet Tarkanian, and we're in Las Vegas. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this era may not even realize who Jerry Tarkanian was because there are a million impressions, but he was always the same man that he was at Long Beach State when he was at junior college before he went to Long Beach State.
Short sleeve dress shirts.
But now he's at Las Vegas, Colin. Now he's there. He has the world, because Las Vegas in 1970s was Sin City. It was just all the mysterious things in life, all the things that everybody wanted to do but were afraid to do.
Yeah.
Go to Las Vegas, we'll do them. Well, Tark, his backup team was the people who lived in Las Vegas and the guys who ran the town. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
You wanted to go to a restaurant, you wanted to do this, you wanted to go to Caesar's Palace, you went through Tark. Well, I then knew a lot of kids that ended up playing, started from Sidney Green and that group of guys. I knew them perfect, from my All-Star game, you know, all these things. We became inseparable. I also did the home games with with Chick Hearn some.
Yeah,
and then,
you
Russ,
became an analyst.
Yeah, I go ahead.
Yeah, so the relationship with Tark it was clearly dynamic, and that's where I knew you. So the movie is really, though, about the Jordan story.
Yes.
So there's a moment in the movie that's fascinating where you're in a hotel room and you're trying to convince Phil Knight. Phil, Nike at that point had $250,000. They were going to sprinkle it to a bunch of players. And you had to convince Phil Knight, the only way we can get Jordan, because we don't have Adidas money or Converse money, we got to give all our money to Jordan. So Jordan, he plays at Carolina. He's kind of a wiry kid. He's obviously very talented. And there's a moment in the movie when you're watching the film and you're saying, on the shot of his career at Carolina, the shot's intended for him, not the best forward in college basketball, James Worthy. Dean Smith is choosing an 18-year-old freshman over his All-American superstar. Is there some truth in that, or is it true?
Everything that Matt said was true. Everything that we talked about was true. The one thing that happened in reality, I was at the game in person when they beat Georgetown.
Yes.
I was representing Nike. Georgetown, John Thompson, like Tarkanian was for me, one of my closest friends in the world. By then, John Thompson had taken care of, the top. Yeah. He had, Patrick Ewing had a great team. It was a great game. I'm sitting there watching this game.
Okay.
I'm rooting for Georgetown.
Sure.
I don't give a damn about North Carolina or Michael Jordan or anybody else. I never thought of him. I never knew Michael Jordan. I never met Dean Smith, and I certainly know that they wore Converse all their lives.
That's right.
So there was nothing. He hits the shot.
Yeah.
As God is my judge, what Matt was able to do on the screen, he did better than anybody could possibly do, and helped Sonny Vaccaro the rest of his life explain what happened. I remembered that shot, that 18 seconds in my mind. I never thought about it again. I was never asked about it again until 2 years later, when now we're recruiting Michael. Somewhere in my subconscious, that was the reason I said to Nike to bet everything on it. As you watch the growth of the movie.
It was your career, by the way.
It was.
If you would have been wrong and he's a bust, the Sonny Vaccaro, there's no Air movie.
There's no Air movie, and I don't know. I always believed I was good. And just so the audience knows, I married Pam a month before I recruited him, so I would have been successful because I had a great backup.
There you go.
My wife, right?
So in the movie, you go, and this makes Phil very angry.
Yes.
You decide, because Michael grew up a Converse and an Adidas guy, and you thought to yourself, rightly so, the only way we got to get a meeting with Michael. Mm-hmm. So you literally traveled, even though David Falk, who I know a little bit, I've interviewed, told you, don't you dare, because he represented Michael, don't you dare go and talk to the family. And you said, well, it's the only way I'm going to get him. So you traveled and you sit down with Michael Jordan's mother, who's a very strong woman, as we find out. Tell me, in the movie it's portrayed that she doesn't give you a lot of time, but she does give you a visit. How long was that meeting with Michael's mother?
The meeting lasted long. It was a continuous meeting. Most of the talk and conversation with Michael's mother came after the first conversation. I didn't know Michael's mother until I had met Michael at Tony Roma's restaurant in Santa Monica.
Okay.
And that's when I met him. I then sensed that my first chance with this, I have to know the family. So on the phones, and there weren't, cell phones, or there weren't, the phones we have today, we get everybody in a second to have video and we know who we're talking about. I talked to Mrs. Jordan on the phone. I arranged everything. Her and I gradually grew close together. The first scene you saw opened the door for me to know the Jordan family. So what you saw happened. It didn't exactly happen the way it's portrayed.
Right.
But I went through her, and at the end of the movie, you'll see how it all ended. She did control it. So go.
Do you remember the moment, the very moment when she called you and said, because it was literally, it changed Nike as a company. It was a running company, not a basketball company. Do you remember where you were sitting, where you were at, the moment you were told, Michael's coming?
That one's easier because, again, we were separated. She was in North Carolina. Yeah. I was actually, I think Pam and I were living in California at that time, whatever. Yeah. I was home, and we had then had numbers, so we did communicate. Now, I hadn't heard from her for a minute or two. The last I talked to anybody representing, Phil Knight about Michael was at the Olympic Games in '84 in August, right here in California. We're right at the beach. And so we had talked to people because Phil at that time, in August of that year, still hadn't made his mind up.
That's right.
Until when you watch in the film at the end, he comes in and, he said, go for it. We made peace.
In the movie, what's fascinating is Phil Knight and you, it's a respectful relationship. He knows you're good at what you do, and he's obviously a gifted man. But it does come across in it that there was a real struggle on this. Is that true?
That's as true. You can make a bet on it today.
So Phil was very much, Sonny, who is this kid?
Yeah. And in reality, it went deeper because we only saw snippets, but it was constant. My life, Rob Strasser and Peter Moore, and obviously Phil, because Phil controlled whatever we did. I mean, there's no question about that. And that was an everyday occurrence. When you saw, and I didn't sleep on the couch up there, but I slept at home. It was 24 for me. That was my life. Now, we have the meeting. We're involved now. By August, we're pretty damn involved.
Yeah.
We got to get them there. When she says she's coming, it's a phone call.
The mom of Michael, yes.
And we knew that she was coming. We knew that she would be there, but it still wasn't over. There was no signed contract. I think some people would be a little misled. Like when they said they were coming out, that's what Falk was afraid of, that she already committed. She came out because she made a commitment, and she listened to what I said because she held me to the wall on what I had said.
Yeah.
When I said, we're going to give you a piece, I only said it because Phil and Rob allowed me to say it. I didn't make that up my own self. I knew how much money, because the $500,000 eventually and the sharing of the profits.
Yeah.
I didn't create that, just for the record. But what I did was the messenger. I was the only one she talked to. I'm the one that promised her the money. And now I'm afraid. You remember the last scene where I don't know what the hell Phil's going to say, and then he says, "You got it." I didn't know. I really didn't know. I was praying, but I just.
Now, were you in the room? In the movie, there's a scene where there's a room, and it's you, and it's Phil, and it's Michael, and they start some goofy montage.
Yes.
And you turned it off because it was kind of clunking, and then you gave a pitch to Michael. Is that true?
That happened, but not as deep as what the film. Matt did a great job. The words he spoke, because Matt and I, we did a 90-minute Zoom before I even met him personally when I came down here to watch the set. No, Matt researched Sonny, and his people researched Sonny. Most of everything he did, we talked about.
Yeah, so in the movie, folks, there's a moment when they have Michael at Nike. They're trying to get him to sign. They're making their pitch. I won't give too much away because I want you to watch the movie. But they have a presentation, and halfway through the presentation, Sonny decides, this ain't going well. I'm going to stop the film and sell Michael on his vision, which he is saying now is true. Again, I don't want to give too much away. It's a real moment in the movie. Now,
Can I say something?
Sure.
I could not have possibly said that speech that Matt gave on my own. It'll take an hour for me to tell these people. What Matt did with the words that he said are iconic. I wish they would print them up and keep them. The speech that the people are going to watch, there are words from Sonny Vaccaro in it.
Yes.
But there are also words that Matt and whatever, embellished in there and sold.
Sure.
But Mrs. Jordan did not say yes until after the speech. That is a fact. Everybody knows that. I believe she would have, but she held us to the wall to the last minute. She wanted everything.
So there's also a moment, there was a great shoe designer downstairs in Beaverton,
Peter Moore,
where you went down into the room and said, we got this kid coming. We don't have much time. You got to create a shoe. You guys came up with a name. And it was decided, which I thought was very clever, that the NBA had a policy that you couldn't have too much red on a shoe or black. It had to be like white. And one of you in the room decided, hey, we're going to make a shoe that's kind of illegal. They're going to fine Michael, but it'll be so talked about, it'll sell the shoe, which is incredible marketing genius. Is that true?
That's true, ladies and gentlemen. And Rob Strausser did that. And I remember the day, the minute Rob Strausser said it. That was John Bateman.
Nike, a legendary Nike employee.
Right. That was Bateman in the movie. And Rob turns and we were all shocked because he hadn't told Phil we were doing this yet. We were going to pay the fine, and that was another $5,000. If we played 40 games, that's another $200,000. I mean,
which, by the way, the Nike budget then was $250,000.
That's it.
So you were willing to pay almost that in fines.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant strategy that it would become the most controversial shoe with the greatest player in it. Did you know? Let's go to this now. So this isn't part of the movie, but it is a question. Did you know, because your career's resting on this,
yes,
and we all know Michael's athletic, he's very good. How many games into Michael's career, Sonny, did you know we made the right bet?
I knew in my mind, just from whoever's watching it, I swear to God Almighty, from the minute I said, give it to the kid, I didn't know this kid. I didn't know anything about him. Go back to the film that Matt's showing the public that they're going to just love the way
his body, his length,
everything. But no, really, what I never forgot, if you watch the movie, Michael putting his hand up. When you go through the film, and that's not how I remember it, because I remember it live and in person at the game, how he explained the 18 seconds. It was 18 seconds of a man's life. If he flubs the ball, if they give it to James Worthy and he bullies over somebody and dunks on it, they give it to Sam Perkins. That was a hell of a team.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, 4 of them in the NBA.
Yeah.
And they end up with the kid. What I saw, he wanted that shot from the 18-second mark on down because he proves it on NCAA film.
Right.
I mean, this was actually happened.
It's filmed.
Yeah, that was the film that happened to 18 to 14 to 13. Michael wanted that damn thing, and the only one that could have worked, and I didn't realize it then, but they showed it in a movie. Last night again, I watched it, when Worthy cleared out the path. And he took the defender watching Robert because everybody in the world would have thought James would have had the last shot.
Yes.
That's just logical. Why wouldn't he? He was one of the greatest players ever to play.
So Dean Smith in that huddle said, get it to Michael.
There was no question. And you can't deny it because it's on film. That's why when it's on film and Matt's explaining it in his voice, you're in capture. You're going to walk away with it. The guy that didn't see it, the audience that hadn't seen it all their lives and don't remember, they weren't born in '84. Ladies and gentlemen, that changed 18 seconds, changed the world. It did.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.